education.
So, Sid, when you said educators are using it, does that mean they're using it to, let's say they have multiple YouTube channels and they're translating it in different languages? Uh, what's the specific use case for an educator?
Fantastic. Okay. So let's sort of look at the education business, right? And then think about the pain points, right? So pain point one, you've got curriculum and you want to turn that into content,
Yeah,
right? Now your biggest problem is, and you'll see this as a theme in every category, right? Your biggest problem is you've got two hands, two legs, you know, three languages, you have 24 hours in a day,
right,
right?
right.
Turning curriculum into content or any base material into content is now enabled using AI, right? And now we are sort of that track.
Mm,
There are 3 to 4 tracks to sort of make that happen, let's say in a video world, and we are the voice and the audio track, right?
that's
Working in conjunction with something else, right? So now you can do that, and you can do that in multiple languages. So that's one. Two, you're trying to do education, but you want it to be personalized,
right.
right? Now, when you think about personalization, right, there are multiple levels to personalization of this. One is pacing, one is curriculum, but even the way you sort of engage with the person, the UI, and so forth, so on, right? Historically, a lot of the personalization in this space was probably more done in terms of choices of what do I put in front, right? But exactly what and how it is said and presented, etc. Right now, that's new. You can use AI to do that, right? And when you're educating someone, again, the personality, the teacher, the voice, it's the point of success, right?
Right.
It's the thing which differentiates a kid not sitting in front of that screen if you're sort of doing this in a scaled way versus you actually having serious results,
Yeah.
right? So that's, let's say, another space, right? Or the third thing, right? You're an ed tech company. You are sort of doing things at, let's say, a certain level of scale, and you want to create personalized conversational experiences with your audiences, right?
Mm.
Again, that's an area where we could come in. You could have a virtual tutor. It could be bi-directional and so forth, so on, right? So I think as each of these things sort of get unlocked, when you're sort of trying to keep this going on the way we are on this podcast,
Right.
I think we've got a role to play there.
Nice. So you touched upon the use case for, let's say, creators, educators, let's say, I'm sure entrepreneurs, like, for example, I know a lot of people are making nameless videos with ElevenLabs, right? So get the script from ChatGPT, feed into ElevenLabs, pick an avatar, and then obviously overlay it with like images, and then just try to monetize on that side. But what are the other use cases that you're seeing? Actually, let me ask you a slightly separate question. Are there specific use cases based on country? Are there specific use cases if you have to break it down in terms of size of the company? Like, oh, startups are using it in a certain way versus, let's say, enterprise mid market folks.
Sure. Okay.
And then industries, if you had to break that down further, like are banking sectors or media houses using it differently? So I
Got
think
it.
it'll be cool to kind of hear that plethora of use cases you're seeing at Level Labs.
Absolutely. So, from what I've seen on the inside, I would map it slightly differently. So, let me explain, right? The first thing is, I was really surprised to sort of find that if you sort of look at our personas, so not necessarily industries, right, but personas of users and what their objective is, it's remarkably similar. And sort of the rank of how many of them are using it, how much, it's actually remarkably similar all around the world. So if I look at India, I look at Europe, I look at the US, it's very similar. So top content creation, right? Now, across various use cases in industry, but content creation, educators, voice actors,
Mm,
huge stakeholders of ours, of course, marketers, right? So forth, so on, right? So you'll find this actually remarkably consistent everywhere, right? Now, what happens is under that, the sort of sub industry and the format of that, that we see change, right? So, for example, if you take the India context, right,
right.
maybe you might say, hey, as you sort of look into this, if you sort of break this up, you say, okay, maybe, marketers, brands, right? Them telling their stories, them connecting with their audience, right? Maybe that's a big thing. Maybe you'll come here and say digital video is a huge category, right? Maybe you'll say, ed tech and content around that's a huge category. Maybe if you go to the US, those categories might change, right? Maybe in the US, you might find podcasts. Hey, maybe that's a bigger category, right? So you'll find some of those, the subcategory sort of change. And that's not even a function of ElevenLabs.
Yeah,
That's a function of the media consumption habits within those countries,
true.
right? And we find ourselves mapping into those workflows, no matter where they are, right? So
Mm.
that's something really interesting that I was surprised to discover when I started looking at things from the inside. On the other side, right? So if you look at our business footprint, and you alluded to this earlier, I think for the first half of our company's journey, we were entirely a product-led growth company.
Sure.
So we had a website, people would come there. We had plans starting at extremely low price points. Even today, you can start off at about $5 a month.
There's a free version also, I think. Of
Absolutely. It gets you to sample the product without commercial use, about 10 minutes of content. But if you really want to start using it and use it, you'd probably have to get on a paid plan, which
right.
starts at about $5 a month, right? So it's not much,
Barely anything. Yeah.
right? And that scale. So that was our entire business. And then, for the last year or so, we've also had what we call an enterprise business,
Sure.
which is folks like me and my team, we're going to big companies and industry and saying, hey, how can we partner with you and add value to you? They become our enterprise customers. It's larger volume, no features, and so forth, so on, right? Now, what we're seeing is pretty much across the board, I would argue that most of our customers are actually businesses. Now, you could be a one person business, you could be a 10,000 person company, right? But you're a business, but then you're reaching a consumer, right? So almost everywhere it's a B2B2C context. That's one, right? And then in that, a lot of the workflows end up becoming quite similar, right? So, for example, you're creating content, you want to do voiceovers, you want to do ads, right? So forth, so on. And you're using that for video, using that for standalone audio creation, using that for product explainers, so forth, so on. So the needs are very similar, and the pain points you're solving are very similar, right? Then you sort of come into branding and marketing. You're saying, I want to create presence, I want to create product explainers, I want to create collateral, I want to create training. Again, it doesn't matter what size you are, right?
Hmm.
That's the objective,
Right.
right? Then you sort of come into other categories, right, where you think about dubbing. Now we know that online content creators are actually, and this is something I saw at YouTube, right? I realized that language is literally just a feature.
True.
Like if your culture can sort of, if your content has cultural context across this and a new audience, right? And in some categories it does, in some it doesn't,
Sure.
right? As long as that can carry, language is just a feature. And you see that, right? YouTube, Meta and their products,
Yeah.
and they have tremendous usage of AI driven dubbing, and so do we. So we've got a lot of creators who use us because we pack a bunch of powerful tools in our AI workflows, and they use us for that. uh, at the same time, we've got tremendous interest and reception at really, really big format, large production companies, broadcasters, movie houses who are saying, hey, I have got these thousands and thousands of hours of unbelievable content and I want to unlock value, right?
Hmm.
How do I make my existing workflow easy? I was talking to a friend of mine who actually heads content at one of the really large production companies and media companies here in the country. And their problem is basically if they want to get something dubbed, that asset is locked up for 2 weeks. They say it's not even a cost problem. How do I get
You say
this?
locked up. What does that mean?
So that's the dubbing process, right? So when you go through the manual dubbing process, you have, let's say, a series, you give it to a partner, and then 2 to 3 weeks later, it comes to you.
Hmm.
But I want this out to my consumer tomorrow,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm, hmm.
right? I'm scale limited in that sense, and sometimes I'm cost limited, right?
Yeah.
So help me with that, or help me uncover new markets, or help me be able to scale across thousands and thousands of hours of content at reasonable cost,
Right.
right? Help me experiment where the cost to experimentation is too high,
Right.
right? So
So,
I think
so actually, that's interesting because, like that, we're seeing with generative AI, right? Like this,
yes,
you should be doing distribution across all content formats. Any content that you have should be repurposed. It be in multiple languages, which I think you're enabling in a big way.